Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. It is Monday, March 30th, 2015, start of a brand new week here of utter insanity, courtesy of the United States government and, well, pretty much every other warmonger on the planet right now. We have lots of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. Tom is sitting in our control room, ready to answer the phone when you call on in, and I'm watching here on the Fox News feed where now Pakistan is sending troops in to help Saudi Arabia in Yemen, and all of these governments may fight amongst each other over who owns what, but the one thing they can always be counted on to unite against is the people of a nation taking their country back, because that's a threat to all their power and authority. And that's what's going on in Yemen. The people of Yemen kicked out their U.S. puppet ruler, and they're just all dogpiling onto Yemen to bomb them into submission and accepting their U.S. puppet back, because it doesn't matter which ruler you've got, you will accept a ruler. That's what the issue in Yemen really is. How dare you stand up and try and run your own country for yourself? That's just not the model of how things are done in the 21st century. All right, so looking up in Ukraine, over the weekend we got a report that Kiev launched an attack against Shirokino near Mariupol. And they're not exactly sure if it's just a reconnaissance in force or an all-out attack, and we've heard nothing else about that so far. India is complaining to Kiev because apparently back in 2009, they entered into a contract with Ukraine for upgrades and maintenance to 40 AN-32 aircraft. And apparently some of them are now deemed untraceable, at least 5 of the aircraft. Nobody knows where they are. They're untraceable. And I think more than likely Poroshenko has commandeered them to use against the East, because he's getting desperate up there. Now, Ukraine's right sector leader and Rada deputy Dmitry Yarosh, in an interview in a Ukrainian newspaper, said that all the residents of Donbass must be deported, deprived of their civil rights. The pogrom begins, because that's exactly what he's talking about. Taking this group of citizens and saying, you have no more civil rights, we're kicking you out of the country. They're well and truly into this thing. The United States National Guard, specifically from Florida, is sending 12 F-15C interceptor jets to Europe to guard against Russian aggression. And everybody's rattling their sabers. I'm not sure how well the F-15C would do up against the latest Russian fighter jets, but they're just basically, they're moving arms and assets to Europe, bit by bit by bit, in the hope that you won't notice, if it's done slowly enough, that they're really getting ready to launch World War III for real. By the way, speaking of Ukraine, back when Malaysian Airlines Flight 17 was shot down, Reuters did a report where they interviewed a guy named Fedotov, who said on camera that he saw a missile launch from an area held by the Ukrainian army. Reuters then said that after the interview was over, Fedotov changed his story and said the rocket came from rebel-held areas, and he didn't want to say that on camera for fear of the rebels coming and doing bad things to him. Now Russia Today has gone back to this gentleman, Fedotov, who says he never said any such thing after the video interview was over, where he said he saw the rocket come up from Ukrainian-held Kiev forces area. That was it. Nobody talked anymore whatsoever. Reuters just made it all up to change what he said to suit the propaganda. Now, there's currently an investigation of a gentleman named Zoran Varasuvsky, the former head of the UBK State Security Agency, and some of the evidence that has surfaced in the investigation describes staging a Ukraine-type coup d'etat in Macedonia, kick up riots, drive the legitimate government from power, put in a puppet. They're still playing these games all over the planet, and I don't think we can really look at Kiev as having been a huge success or a slam dunk on this issue. Now, the big news today is the Arab League has agreed to create a joint unified Arab military force. This was announced by Egypt's president as they're all getting ready to gang up on Yemen. And everybody's out there saying, yes, we're going to have this mighty army in the Middle East that will simply march wherever it wants to go. And almost as soon as that announcement was made, the Palestinian Authority president, Mahmoud Abbas, said their first target should be Hamas in Gaza. So here you have the leader of the Palestinian Authority calling for an attack on Palestinians to get rid of his political opposition. And here's the interesting part of this story. We've had Israel screaming about, oh, we're threatened by our neighbors, we're threatened by our neighbors. And right now, Netanyahu is so focused on Iran, he doesn't seem to realize that a unified 22-member United Arab military implies a 22-member United Arab coalition and the end of Israel's hegemony in the region. Because if you have all 22 Arab nations moving together simultaneously, that is a force to be reckoned with. And there's absolutely no guarantee that with that much power they would remain friendly to the United States or Israel. But everybody's so focused on getting the war with Iran going, they really can't see more than a week into the future. Now, speaking of Yemen, the U.S. is saying that an F-15S suffered a technical difficulty over the Red Sea, but the pilots were rescued. And it's possible the F-15 has its problems, just like the F-22 and the F-35, or maybe they don't want it known that the people of Yemen are able to shoot down invading warplanes, because the Houthis are saying, yes, they did shoot it down, more than one, and they currently have a Sudanese pilot as a prisoner of war. Now, as we mentioned on Friday, Israeli fighter jets have joined with Saudi Arabia against the people of Yemen. And it's like the comment I made at the beginning of the show. They're all going to argue, all these ruling parties and clans and leaders and royalty are going to argue with each other over who owns what. But the one thing they will always unite together on is the idea of the people of a nation taking their nation back. That's what's going on in Yemen. We're going to grab ourselves a phone call here. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Yeah, the F-15's direct competitor would be the Su-35, and the Su-35 would come out ahead, right up to the F-22, you know. All they have to do is upgrade components in the Su-35, you know. It's cheaper.
Yeah, it is, and they make a lot more of them for the same amount of money.
Yeah, but this is just token stuff. You know, the same with the convoy. Yeah, albeit -1 that broke down. That's what left the Czechoslovakian people waiting for hours.
Yeah, that's the really alarming part about this. The U.S. is ramping up this major global war with weapon systems that are really not very reliable or durable or decent. And, you know, it could be propaganda to sucker Russia into thinking we can actually beat these guys. But we keep hearing this from all these different sources about all these problems with all these airplanes, these warships. Computer systems won't work. And, you know, when the U.S. first got into World War II, and this is one of the things that, you know, the young Harry Truman was trying to deal with. The U.S. had spent all this money on weaponry and discovered most of it was just overpriced junk, because making the money was the point of the exercise, not coming up with effective, reliable weapons. And we, you know, I mean, the Pentagon Wars, the story about the Bradley infantry fighting vehicle, that whole M16 versus the other rifle, that big scandal where they deliberately sabotaged the M16 because there were contracts on the line and we're going to get bonuses. It really is a giant money-making opportunity. And now they're going to send our kids out to another bloody war with equipment that may not work. Dustin, got to let you go here. Sorry I talked us into the commercial. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about Yemen, and Yemen's president is saying the Houthis are stooges of Iran. This from the stooge of the United States. And, of course, Iran is denying that they have anything to do with what's going on in Yemen. This is just more of, oh, there's Russian tanks in eastern Ukraine, Saddam has nuclear weapons, Assad has sarin gas, there were torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, a Spanish mine in Havana Harbor, and on and on and on and on and on. How many more times do you have to be lied to by the government until you accept the fact that government lies to you about pretty much everything? We're going to grab ourselves a phone call here. Ron in Missouri, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, Mike. What I might say might be a little controversial, maybe not. Anyway, I kind of agree with Charlie Regal in the Senate. I think we ought to put the draft back up again.
Well, obviously we disagree on that. When are you enlisting in the armed forces?
I don't think people have enough kin in the game. I think once you get enough people where 18-year-old daughter is going to be sent off to a war in the Middle East, I think they might start picking up a little bit then.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, the instant they announce there's a draft, there's going to be a huge surge of opposition unless by then the U.S. government has pulled off some kind of a deception to where we're just all ready to go and fling our babies onto ISIS bayonets wherever they may be. And they've been trying it with all these, videotaped or beheadings and executions and trying to create ISIS as such a horrible monster that normal, rational parents are willing to see their own children bloodied, crippled, and killed to get those really bad people. Now, so far, they're not getting a lot of traction, but I'm expecting them to keep on trying because we know the motto of this government is, if at first you don't succeed, lie, lie again.
Well, I don't think the American people will stand up for it, period.
Well, I never confuse silence for consent. And I think, again, going back and looking at the collapse of the Soviet Union, or for that matter, the overthrow of Romania, Ceausescu. Just a couple of weeks before it all happened, just looking around, you'd think everything was fine, everybody was quiet and polite, but when that spark hit, it just all happened incredibly rapidly. And more, I'm hearing a lot of people just absolutely disgusted with what's going on, with all these wars, the torture, the concentration camps, the spying on us all. And even the most die-hard, blinded by belief patriot is realizing that this government has gone completely off the rails.
I think the draft would be the spark for America, period.
I would like to hope so, but I'm concerned that they will precede the draft with some kind of a big bang, like a new Pearl Harbor, to just get people to say, we've got to go and we've got to give those people what for. Here, take my babies, take my money. And
I have no doubt about that, but I think people are a little bit wiser.
I would certainly like to hope so, because we're down to the wire on this one. This global war is accelerating. Everybody's starting to fight everybody. They're just waiting for the big bang where everybody will say, oh, yeah, I guess it is a new world war, isn't it? Okay?
I don't know. Anyway, it's my opinion. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We're going to switch over to Damien in New York. Aloha, Damien. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Nice to talk to you. Look, you're a hero. Thank you for everything you're doing. I just want to say that first. There's so much crap going on, so it's just a million things to talk about, of course. But first, there was a report in Yemen about the unmarked fighter planes that had attacked. Was there any new news on that? I mean, now that we know all these things about all these various countries just basically throwing their head in the ring as far as their missiles in the ring, I should say.
There's never been a follow-up on the unmarked planes, but I guess they decided they weren't going to be able to get their U.S. puppet back in covertly, so they just said, we're just going to go on and invade the place.
Yeah,
give those Yemeni people what for and tell them, how dare you decide you're going to take your country back from the New World Order.
Exactly.
That's just not allowed.
Exactly. There was also all this talk about how Netanyahu and Israel doesn't spy on the United States and blah, blah. I just say, people have to remember, I love the way they do this. I mean, and love by love, I mean hate. When they were doing this most recent, annihilation in Gaza, attacking Gaza, they dropped that little bombshell about Netanyahu had all these, he tried to blackmail Clinton when Clinton was in office with all these tapes from Monica Lewinsky and everything. And it got out in the New York Times, the Times of Israel, it got it everywhere. It wasn't covered at all because it was going on during that time when they decided to release that information publicly in the mainstream media. And nobody even talks about that. No, it's just completely gone. It was another thing. Just let's throw this in there so that people will be, we can say
we must always show our leaders as wonderful, honest, upright people. But, we even knew back when it was all going down. Clinton had already been notified by a foreign power that they had the tapes. They got them by tapping the phone at Monica Lewinsky's end of the line. And they used it to pressure Clinton, to pressure the FBI to stop looking for Israel's top spy in the administration, which a lot of people thought might have been Rahm Emanuel. And so, yeah, we knew they had the tapes. I mean, it was a classic honey trap is what was going on here. And it's one of the reasons why I'm glad to see, at least over in Great Britain, they're starting to bring out all this stuff about, abusing children and the rest of it, because these are the levers by which governments are covertly controlled by the true rulers of the world.
Yeah. Last thing I wanted to say, I'm sorry to take up so much time. The U.S. dollar, you had mentioned it a couple times, and I think it's brilliant actually about as far as what the currency is backed with. You mentioned one time about electrical units and that sort of thing. I almost think that it would be great to base it not only on that, but agriculture, almost like a resurgence of the greenback being veggies in agriculture.
That's not a bad idea either, because you have a commodity everybody recognizes as worth something. The volume of commodity increases to keep pace with the population. Nobody can Well, actually, Monsanto's in the business of monopolizing agriculture right now.
I mean, we're seeing this phase out of GMOs. People are finally getting the idea. So, I mean, if the currency is backed by a bad product, a GMO product, obviously it's not going to be worth anything, just like the dollar now. But I almost think the dollar we need to almost let the dollar go to the people that have destroyed it. So let's let the financial institutions, the banks, Wall Street, let's let them have the dollar. We'll create our own dollar with a different currency.
I agree.
And,
I agree.
We'll be generous. We'll say that our dollars, we'll give them, 1.5 to one of our dollars. We'll start generous with them, and then we'll let them, break it down. By the time they're done, 100 of their dollars will be worth one of our dollars.
The problem is, the government is already moving to outlaw alternative currencies, even though, the U.S. dollar is legal tender, but it doesn't say it's the only one. But in order to keep the Federal Reserve's monopoly on the debt slavery system, they're going after alternative currencies. They're trying to discredit Bitcoin. Anyway, listen, Damien, we got to let you go here. We got to take a break for commercials.
That's you, Michael.
We got another caller waiting on the line, and we'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. And let's see. For some reason, I seem to have a little bit of a volume problem here. Let me see if I can correct that. Testing 1, 2, 3.
I got you loud and clear.
Okay, you got me loud and clear. Then the problem is feedback to my headset. All righty. Right. So anyway, a couple of quick stories here. Bombs and booby traps. ISIS keeps Iraq stalled into Crete. And so basically, it's, at the moment, it is a standoff. And the standoff is continuing, primarily because having the home court advantage, the Iraqi people are able to set traps and so forth for the oncoming troops. Now, the U.S. military is out there trying to say that they're victorious in Iraq. They're rushing in to try and take the credit away from the Iranian Republican Guard, who are there on the ground leading this assault. And now there's a new scandal because apparently there was a U.S. drone strike that killed some of the Iranian advisors in Iraq, and Iraq is saying, what the heck are you doing? And the U.S. is saying, I don't know. All righty, let's see. We're going to take a phone call here. It's either Michelle or
Michelle.
It's Michelle in Florida. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I just wanted to get your take on this Jade Helm situation, because this, I know you get on comments, on articles that have comments on them, and it seems like a lot of people literally think that, the American military are going to, try to take our guns or drag us off to concentration camps or, whatever. I just can't see that happening. I mean, they're Americans first and foremost.
Well, let me start off by saying I agree with you, but I think the concern is they're very obviously training for those kinds of activities, but the reason I don't think it's for real, for the schedule, is it's only in 10 states. And if the U.S. were to attempt to declare martial law in just 10 states and start rounding up dissidents, there'd be a very angry and hostile reaction from the remaining 40 states. When the U.S. decides to hit that panic button, it'll be all 50 states at the same time with virtually no warning. But it is very alarming that they are training Americans to go up against Americans. And there will be some reluctance, but we already know from past regimes in other countries, such as Cambodia, a good example where the government succeeded in convincing their own citizens that these other citizens were bad people and needed to be killed.
Yes, but I just can't comprehend that. I can't wrap my mind around it because, like you always say, these are, our children or our brothers or sisters or, they're related to, people here. So how can you be so brave?
Well, what they'll do is they'll take the soldiers from Georgia and deploy them over in California so they don't know anybody there. They're all strangers. They'll take the soldiers from California and deploy them in Texas. Same rationale. They will not make the mistake of deploying any of these forces into their own neighborhoods where they grew up and have family to avoid that precise complication.
Right, but don't you think that there has to be something in their brain that they're saying, okay, we're going to take you over and put you in California, that if they're doing that to people in California, that somebody is then in turn doing that in their state to their family?
It could very well be. Again, it all depends on how the U.S. government prepares the propaganda ahead of time, like a big domestic upset. Oh, we've got to get those gunners. There'll be more mass shootings or something like that. And, again, the government will have to convince these people to do it. We saw the Nazis did it with the German people. Stalin did it with the Russian people. It is, unfortunately, tragically, easy for a government to turn one part of their population against the other.
Well, I think that's part of the big problem is that, people are having, it's just like, it's so hard for you to wrap your mind around that your own military would be used against you, and that they would actually go along with it. It's just, it's hard to even,
Well, think about the United States in 1776, before the Declaration of Independence, when those British regulars were abusing the colonials, those were their own armed forces. I mean, history has come down to us saying that Paul Revere ran through town shouting, the British are coming, the British are coming. He wouldn't have said that because they were all British. It was a British colony. He would have said the regulars are coming. And yes, the British soldiers fired on British subjects. And, it does happen, unfortunately. Now, I know there's a lot of military who wouldn't like doing it. Going back to that combat arms survey, that they gave to the Marines at 29 Palms. I heard afterwards from one of the people who took it saying, we all said yes, we would confiscate guns from citizens and shoot those who resist because that's what our officers wanted to hear. But I think, again, it all depends on how the government brainwashes and propagandizes those troops. I mean, for one thing, more and more communications in and out of U.S. military facilities are being heavily filtered. You can't see my website or hear my radio show in any U.S. military base, domestic or foreign, and that leaves the military just there to be able to completely control what these soldiers are hearing and seeing, convince them that anybody who talks about the Constitution is a potential terrorist, that all gun owners are dangerous, and whatever they want to say, to basically just feed them enough lies to say, yeah, I know these are my fellow Americans, but they're bad people and they have to go.
Well, if people have, family in the military, they need to talk to them, and basically tell them, you cannot do that. You cannot do that to your own people. I know if I had somebody in my family who was in the military, I'd have been all over them like white on rice. And saying you can't do that. But I don't have anybody, in my family who's in the military, but I just hope that they don't do it. I seriously just hope that they, because
this could just be a giant theater production by the federal government to warn us all what will happen if we don't behave, which I don't think is going to work. And it doesn't guarantee they're going to do it, but they may just be trying to scare us all back into silent obedience. And I don't think it's going to work. I mean, certainly by your reaction.
No, I definitely don't think that it is. Not from everything that I'm seeing. It's basically just pissing people. I'm sorry. It's just basically making people more angry and frustrated, than they were before. So it seems to have had the opposite effect, if that's the effect that they're going for. They've botched so much of the propaganda lately. And again, I've commented that when you're getting your propaganda created for you by advertising agencies and public relations firms who just naturally think only in terms of 30, 60 seconds, maybe 1 or 2 weeks for a campaign,
it doesn't have a long-term cohesiveness, and it doesn't present a believable alternative reality for people to believe in and trust, because it is so self-contradictory, and of course that works for our favor.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks for your opinion, Mike.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the phone call, Michelle. We're going to let you go here. Now, Boehner is already out there screaming that if the Iran talks fail, and they're doing everything they can to try and keep that Congress will pass harsher sanctions against Iran. They're just going to beat on Iran for refusing to do as they're told by the mighty United States and the mighty Israel. And, of course, my comment to John Boehner is, here's your rifle, here's your parachute, go on. If you want to have a war with Iran, you lead it. Now, Boehner is actually calling Obama an anti-war president. And the absurdity of that, of course, is that Obama, during his time in the Oval Office, has bombed 7 foreign countries. He's not anti-war. I think at the moment he is opposed to a war that he's not sure the U.S. can win, and that is a very valid concern for the Commander-in-Chief to be thinking about right now. Meanwhile, we're hearing from Press TV that France has taken the lead away from the United States in terms of finding a way to derail the P5+1. Got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu, with his mantle of invulnerability from this last election, which, remember, the Israeli authorities found at least 51 cases of election fraud that were taking place, and that's now all gone away. None dare call it election fraud, because if the candidate wins, none dare call it fraud. All right, and I realize I butchered that, but now Netanyahu is out there screaming that a P5+1 agreement will be rewarding Iran for aggression, and Israel will be the first to be harmed. Now, this is total nonsense for 2 reasons. Iran has not initiated an aggressive war in over 200 years. It's not their nature, and stands in sharp contrast to Israel and the United States, which can't seem to go for 2 months without attacking or bombing or drone striking somebody. Israel's not going to be the first to be harmed, because now the United States government has officially acknowledged Israel is a nuclear-armed state. As far as we know, the only one in the Middle East. Iran is not going to attack them because Israel can destroy them back, and with the U.S. hopping on just for good measure. They're going to turn Iran into a giant green glass parking lot and send in the Marines to paint the stripes. But Netanyahu wants Iran smashed because being the region's only nuclear power isn't enough for him. He's got to get rid of Iran. He's just so focused on it, he doesn't realize the Arab states around him. 22 Arab nations have just formed a loose coalition. Here's your rifle, Bibi. Now, Senator John McCain, proving that we really ought to have mental health examinations for members of Congress, is out there saying it's time for Israel to go rogue and just launch the war on Iran. Just forget all this talk. We know we want a war with Iran. Just go on in and blow up their power station. All right, we're going to grab ourselves a phone call. We're going to go to Cameron in the United Kingdom. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, good afternoon, Michael. Michael, just need your opinion on something. I think all this situation in Yemen is perpetrated by Israel. They sort of wanted Saudi Arabia to start this because they've lost hope of getting anything out of America. Now, they sort of moving their planes one by one to Saudi Arabia to get ready to hear from this 5+1 sort of to see what's happening there. And I'm sure with the next couple of days, few days, they're going to launch an attack and then wait for U.S. to actually just walk in and sort of start clearing their mess. I mean,
well,
I don't
now,
know.
technically, the P5+1, the final deadline is July 1st. This deadline that's coming up here in a couple of days is an interim deadline. Iran was saying we can finalize the deal by then, but the real final deadline is the 1st of July. Now, we're also coming up on holiday weekend, Good Friday, Easter, Passover, and it's a wonderful opportunity for Israel to blow up an important Christian shrine like the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, or something else and say, oh, my God, look what Iran did, or look what those Muslims did, and just try and fan the war up that way. Or, as Senator McCain is out there saying, Israel may just haul off and attack Iran's nuclear power station the way they did in Iraq, at Osirak. And they'll go in, examine the ruins, and discover it's just another power station, but the damage will be done, and all the Iranian people will be having to be dealing with that radioactivity wafting all over their country. And the situation is just absolutely crazy.
Absolutely. I mean, McCain, as you mentioned just before my call, he okayed this for Israel. So, I mean, I think it's very, very likely that Israel launch an attack very soon against Iran.
I agree. I don't think they can keep up the propaganda all the way into the 1st of July. But they're pushing really hard. I mean, you can just feel the momentum building all across Europe, all across the Middle East, all across Africa. The momentum is building to get this world war going, and they're going to have to start it with some kind of a major event, because right now in Israel, in the United States, all across Europe, you don't have populations who are predisposed to follow their government into yet another war. And any government that launches an aggressive war that their own people are opposed to is already on the losing side. And I don't care how many wonder weapons they've built.
Absolutely. Michael, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Have a great afternoon.
I will do my best. We will let you go here. Now then, over in Tunisia, they're holding a huge march to protest against the terrorism which has struck their country recently from sources unknown, although there was one report saying that there were indications this was Mossad at work here. Now, over in Ghana, the U.S. is pre-positioning Marines because Nigeria is about to have their elections. And there's already indications of massive fraud, and the result of the elections could trigger a civil war in that country, so the Marines are standing by in neighboring Ghana to go in and evacuate American personnel. We are being told. Could also be going in to slap down an upstart victory and restore the status quo. The U.S. is doing a lot of that. Alrighty, over in Palestine, settlers have destroyed 1,200 Palestinian olive trees near Hebron. And this is the third attack on the villagers' ability to have a livelihood. This is what they do. They grow and export olives, and it takes 10 years for an olive tree to grow large enough to produce a usable, saleable crop. So this is outright attempting to destroy them economically. The Israeli court has now ordered the demolition of another Palestinian village in the West Bank. And the pretext is the village was built without an Israeli permit. The village was built before Israel existed. Alrighty, we're getting a lot more information about this Germanwings Airbus crash, and there's a lot of information going on. Earlier today, they had this big celebration for the heroic captain who tried to save the flight, and this is starting to feel like the myth that rose up around Flight 93, which we know was a completely concocted cover story. We're seeing one story over in Spiza.com claiming that they have evidence the co-pilot had converted to Islam and this was therefore a Muslim terror attack. We got the very earliest report from CNN about what was happening with the Airbus, and there were two things in there. It confirms there was a distress call of some kind. It's not clear if it came from the aircraft or if something from the aircraft caused ground control to declare emergency. One interesting piece of information is the aircraft suddenly slowed down while still climbing and then regained speed. That's not something you want to do in a climb. And meanwhile, they're trying to sell this whole thing about, co-pilot suicide. Same thing they did for Egypt Air 990. Cover story. Oh, suicidal pilot. Suicidal pilot. Now, Francois Hollande has come out talking about the digital flight recorder, saying the memory card is missing. Like digital flight recorders are like your camera or your smart device where there's a little slot and there's a card that goes in there and it can be dislodged so easily. And we've got another case of evolving story. because originally they said they found the digital flight recorder, then they said, no, we didn't find it. Then they came back and said, well, we only found the case, which was empty. Then they came back and said, well, we found the digital flight recorder, but the memory card is missing. All right? Now, over at my website, I posted a diagram of the digital flight recorder system that is used on the Airbus aircraft. It does not have a slot into which a memory card goes. There are multiple memory chips attached directly to a stack of circuit boards, and they're inside a heavy steel shell, and they make multiple recordings to preserve the data. There's no way the memory can vanish completely from the digital flight recorder unless it was deliberately taken out. And when we come back from the news break, we'll be talking about a lot more reasons to think that we are not getting the straight story on this. And we don't even need to know exactly what happened to this Germanwings Airbus. We all know we're being lied to, and that's enough to get our dander up, as it were. We'll be back after the news. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show. Hour number 2 here. We're talking about the crash of the Germanwings Airbus and the rush to judgment that the co-pilot, Andreas Lubitz, committed suicide and took all those poor screaming passengers with him. And there are reasons to doubt the official story. Last week, they were telling us that Lubitz, yes, he was under medical care, but it wasn't for depression. They wouldn't tell us what it was for, but it wasn't for depression. Now they're out there saying that, oh, yes, he was horribly depressed. He had suicidal thoughts. And at this point, it really is moot, because we're looking at a story that is laced with lie after lie after lie. There was a distress call of some kind. The aircraft lost airspeed before the descent began. The White House had issued that very bizarre statement how they knew the crash was not related to terrorism before anybody really knew what the cause was supposed to be. There was all the games about the digital flight recorder. They're claiming that Lubitz was breathing normally, and it was the sounds of his normal breathing were caught on the cockpit voice recorder. Well, you've been in airplanes in flight. They're very noisy, and the cockpit is noisier than the cabin. The story just is breaking down left and right. All right, we're going to grab a couple of phone calls here. John in Barbados. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. I think this Germanwings story, most of it is rubbish. I think basically we need to look at the aeroplane first. And as I told you the other day, I downloaded the cockpit door operations manual, and there is a way for that captain to go into that cockpit. Mm-hmm. The keypad is the forward galley. He puts a secret number into it, presses the button, and the door is open.
Yeah, we had a video posted about that. You know, one of the things I uncovered is that apparently the Airbus does have a past history of going into descents on autopilot and, without any command from the flight crew. There's an issue with the autopilot there as well.
Yeah. Well, the other story, of course, is that it would have been possible, I say it would have been possible with the flight computers, because there's no direct contact between the pilot and the flying services and what have you. It's through these 3 computers. One is used at a time. If that fails, the second one comes into play. If that fails, the third one. And if that fails, well, put your wings on, you're going to heaven.
Yeah, it's stick and rudder times. When the computers all fail, in theory, those flight crews can just stick and rudder the aircraft and get it back down there safely. But at this point, we have to look at motives. Obviously, from the French government's point of view, they want to protect the reputation of Airbus. From Germany's point of view, they want to protect the reputation for safety of the German air carriers. Frankly, from this chasing its own tail, self-contradictory propaganda, I'm starting to wonder if maybe there's been another one of these very tragic accidental shoot-downs by military forces, because they do happen. And certainly TWA 800 was one of those. The Iranian Airbus was one of those. We're starting to think that the Malaysian flight, the other one, 317 or whatever it was down there in Indonesia, that was reported as a military shoot-down. And this could very well be another one. I mean, everybody in that part of the world is trigger happy. They're all waiting for something to happen.
They're very nervous, as you say, Michael.
Yes.
But that story is already making the rounds. But I mean, I'm skeptical on all the stories that have been published so far. I mean, if the captain had used the keypad, the only way to stop him getting in there was if the keypad had failed. But of course, if the keypad had failed, then the door operating is definitely on the flight data recorder. That's possibly why this seems to have gone missing.
Well, if there was a mechanical problem with the aircraft or there were indications of something striking the aircraft from outside, that's another reason for the memory to be removed from the digital flight recorder. But there is no way there is a memory card that can pop out. These things are designed to take an impact. And again, look at the diagram. There are multiple memory chips directly attached to circuit boards inside this heavy steel protective chamber. And they record multiple copies of all the data, to basically make sure that you've got at least one correct stream. We don't know what actually happened to that aircraft, but at this point it's pretty obvious we're being fed a line.
Well, actually, those flight data recorders and cockpit voice recorders are encased in the toughest material known to man. It's called titanium steel. And, it just doesn't bend even if you fly it at a mountain at 400 knots.
Yeah, I mean, they're designed to survive that kind of an impact. John, listen, I need to let you go. We got one more caller I want to get before our commercial break, so thank you very much. We're going to switch over to Adam in California. Aloha, Adam. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I was just curious if you know anything about this Operation Jaded Helm. I've been seeing it pop up here and there.
Yeah.
I know it's really early, but I was just curious.
Well, we had a caller who called in and talked about it, and I've got some commentary about it on the front page of whatreallyhappened.com. It is very alarming to see the U.S. government training the U.S. military to basically invade states, capture the state governments, round up dissidents. I don't think they're doing it for real, because if they were, it would be all 50 states at the same time, not just a selected 10. I think this may be a propaganda operation to try and scare us all back into silent consent and complicity with what the government is doing by demonstrating what they will do if we continue being uppity Americans who think that we should have a voice in the running of this country.
Okay, thank you, Mike. I'll go ahead and look on the front page.
Right.
I was a late tuner today.
All right, well, thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. Now, I've been talking about the blueprint for the new America, and one of the conditions that is we're talking about is that members of Congress, if they vote for war, must be on the front lines themselves. And it turns out it's not entirely a new idea, because back in 1916, when they were in the middle of big mistake number 1, there was actually a constitutional amendment proposed that would have removed the war authority from Congress and made it subject to a popular vote of the entire nation. And it included a provision that those voting for war would be forced to enlist in the military service. Obviously, it went nowhere, because those who want war want to be able to order that war and not have to fight it themselves. That's what your children are for. The leadership, we're too precious, we're elite, we can't risk ourselves in these, your kids, they're not good for anything else anyway here. Now, turning to the economy, defying the United States, Australia and Denmark have now applied to join the China-led Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. And more, Washington, D.C. is realizing this new China AIIB is on the way to supplanting the U.S.-dominated International Monetary Fund. One of the reasons it's doing that is because, as most of these countries can tell you, the IMF has been weaponized. It's not just about loaning money and making money. It is used as a tool of foreign policy. We'll give you the IMF bailout, but you must allow GMO into your country and things like that. And that has really angered a lot of people, and I think that's one of the reasons so many nations, including erstwhile U.S. allies, are now signing on to this Asian bank. They're ready to live in a world that is not dominated and dictated to by U.S.-centric banking systems. Fitch has now downgraded Greece's rating to CCC. They're all concerned that there will be a sovereign default. Of course there will be. Under private central banking, sovereign defaults are inevitable, just a matter of time. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And we're looking at the economic news. As I mentioned before the break, Fitch has now downgraded Greece's credit rating to CCC. And there are worries Greece will default on its sovereign debt. Now, I know I keep saying this, but it bears repeating. Default is inevitable in any nation or alliance where a privately owned central bank is allowed to issue all of the public currency as a loan at interest, because by design the debt always exceeds the available money supply. Debt grows until it crashes the system, and along the way, governments are forced into more and more confiscation from citizens, and when that no longer keeps up with the debt payments, wars of conquest to try and delay the inevitable outcome. Private central banks are the common enemy of all mankind. Now then, the Greek energy minister is accusing Germany of being unscrupulous and imperialist by taking the hard line regarding Greece's debt, and will seek bold alternatives in Russia. Now, Germany, the European Union, the ECB have to take that hard line. If they cut Greece any slack on any of their debt, every other member nation of the European Union is going to demand exactly the same thing. So the ECB has to take the hard line, and the hard line is driving Greece to leave the European Union and pivot toward Russia, at which point they'll have to say, oh, ISIS is in Greece. We've got to invade ISIS. We've got to bomb ISIS back into the slavery of the European Central Bank. Now, over in Donetsk, they have started their own pension fund, because when this whole issue with Kiev broke out, Kiev canceled all social payments to retirees as a form of collective punishment, which, by the way, is a war crime. And so Donetsk is putting together their own fund, and they will take care of all those retired people. Meanwhile, over in Brussels, 17,000 Belgians protested against austerity in Brussels. And a reminder, when you, of your own free will, decide to live a simpler, less expensive life, that's austerity. When the government comes in and orders you to live a simpler, less expensive lifestyle and then give the surplus cash to them, that's dictatorship. That's not austerity. That's pillaging. It's looting. It's confiscation. It's a repeat of the same message we've been hearing from the money junkies all along. You must make do with less so we can have more. You must make do with less so we can have more. You must make do with less so we can have more. Over in Great Britain, they are so desperate for more of their people's money, they're now talking about a tax on bank deposits. Now, it was originally raised by the Labour Party in 2013. Tony Abbott criticized it and rejected it at the time. Now they're looking at bringing it back. All of these governments are hopelessly in debt because that is the way private central bank made them. And they're looking for any way they can take more money from you and not have you kick up a fuss, whether it's Obamacare, carbon taxes, taxes on your bank deposits, negative interest rates. And it's another reason to not put a lot of your money in those banks any longer. It's not like they really need it or dependent on it. They're just making up the money as they go along here. Meanwhile, China is going to provide the French oil company Total with $15 billion for development of the Yamal liquefied natural gas plant on Russia's Yamal Peninsula. This is a cooperation between China, Russia, and France. They're all making deals while the U.S. is out there trying to make war. And it will put further restraints on France from joining in against any war with either Russia or China. All righty. Now, here's an interesting little story. Came out of S.J. Lindman Blogspot. Washington wants its big lying machine revved up. We are seeing this report coming out of Reuters, where Washington, D.C. is wringing its hands and decrying the fact that they're losing the information war to Russia. And this Reuters report was written by two known U.S. propagandists, S. Anders Wimbush and Elizabeth Portal. And they're pulling together a coalition of support, policymakers and members of Congress, to rebuild America's propaganda machine from the ground up and give it 10 times the budget it has now, because they're saying we're losing the information war. People don't believe the United States government any longer. They're believing these other countries. They're believing the independent media. Well, we cheated. We have the truth on our side, is what it comes down to. And cranking up a bigger propaganda machine is not going to convince anybody of anything other than that the U.S. is cranking up the propaganda machine again. Propaganda only works against a population who doesn't realize it's going on. It has to be covert, clandestine, concealed from the general public. We're past that point. The American people know this government is lying to them about just about everything. Throwing more money at it isn't going to do anything except create a lot more noise out there. And people instinctively will go where they feel they're going to find the truth about what's going on. That's why the independent media, running on spare change, and by the way, we can always use more donations, is pulling in a larger audience than big corporate-supported organizations like MSNBC that have millions of dollars to play with. Meanwhile, in the wake of the announcement by Senate Minority Leader Harry Reid that he will be retiring after his term ends in 2016, Senator Chuck Schumer, friend of Wall Street and war, is apparently next in line to be the head of the Democrats in Congress. Not really good news. Meanwhile, over in Israel, former Israeli Prime Minister Olmert has been found guilty in another scandal, the cash envelopes affair. He's looking at a 6-year prison term for corruption. And this is like his second corruption trial so far. And this is one of the reasons why Netanyahu had to stay in office. As soon as he is no longer a head of state, there are corruption prosecutions waiting for him. Getting on over back to Hillary Clinton, article out of Blacklisted News. Was Hillary Clinton, while Secretary of State, running a secret spy network outside the normal intelligence community? Does seem to be the case. We'll be right back. Oh, hi, America. Welcome back to the show. And before we went to the commercial break, we were posing a question, or actually it was being posed over at Blacklisted News. Was Hillary Clinton, while Secretary of State, running her own secret spy network outside the official intelligence organizations, whose job it is to do that sort of thing? And it revolves around some revelations coming out of her email that Sidney Blumenthal, back in 2012, was using Hillary's private email server to pass her back-channel intelligence about the situation in Libya in the run-up to the Benghazi disaster. Those emails were accessed by a Romanian hacker, Marcel Lehel-Lazar, and made public. The scandal keeps on growing. And, of course, as you're probably already aware, in a move reminiscent of Lois Lerner's IRS emails, they're not here anymore. Hillary Clinton's private email server, after she cherry-picked what she was going to give to the Congressional Committee investigating what was going on, she wiped her server clean, formatted the hard drive, low-level format, which basically turns it into a brick. And obviously, regardless of what was on that hard drive, Hillary was hiding something from somebody. Even Richard Nixon didn't dare destroy those White House tapes, other than that 18-minute segment on the one that supposedly was accidentally over-recorded. And Hillary just said, oh, you have no right to know. Wipe the server clean. Now, this brings us to U.S. Code Title 18, Part 1, Chapter 101, Section 2071. Anybody who willfully and unlawfully conceals, removes, mutilates, obliterates, or destroys, or attempts to do so, or with intent to do so, takes and carries away any record, proceeding, map, book, paper, document, or other thing, filed or deposited with any clerk or officer of any court of the United States or in any public office, or with any judicial or public officer of the United States, shall be fined under this title and imprisoned not more than 3 years or both. It gets better. Under paragraph B, it says, whoever having the custody of any such record, proceeding, map, book, document, paper, or other thing, willfully and unlawfully conceals, removes, mutilates, obliterates, falsifies, or destroys the same, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 3 years or both, and shall forfeit his, in this case her, office, and be disqualified from holding any office under the United States. Hillary Clinton can't be president. And if she's made president, it's just another reminder that the U.S. government doesn't play by its own rules. Rules and laws, that's just for you little people, you slaves. That's what the laws are for. We're above the law. We're omnipotent. Now, not too long ago, there was this copyright trolling operation called Perfect 10. And basically, they set up a phony pornographic magazine publisher, and were waiting for people to download content and repost it, at which point they would file a lawsuit. And they brought a lawsuit against Giganews. And basically, Giganews took them back to court and said this was a hoax, this was a fraud. The court agreed. The copyright troll organization Perfect 10 has been ordered to pay $5.6 million settlement. All right. Now then, down in Missouri, the spokesman for the Missouri Auditor's Office has died from what they are claiming to be a self-inflicted gunshot wound. This death comes just 1 month after the state auditor himself also died, supposedly from a self-inflicted wound. And the police are out there saying, oh yeah, they're suicides. With strange tragedy, just 1 month apart, then both of them are suicides. Absolutely. Sure. Now over in California, they're starting to show a little bit of common sense. There is a bill making its way through the California legislature that would require a warrant based on probable cause, oath, and affirmation for all access to electronic information, including that obtained by these portable Stingray devices. The police in California would not be allowed to just set it up, siphon off everything they could, and go pouring through it looking for a crime. I have a feeling there'll be a tremendous amount of opposition to this legislation because right now the police want the ability to just look through all your data and just look for anything that might be construed as a crime. Apparently there's this big stink going on between police and fire in this one city. Police officer pulled over a firefighter in his own car to cite him for having tinted windows. When the firefighter showed that he had a permit to have tinted windows on his vehicle, the cop recited him for a broken headlight. The firefighter demonstrated all the headlights were working, and the situation deteriorated from there. So now you've got this town where the police department and the fire department are already at each other's throats. Our society is tearing itself apart right now. Last night on HBO, they had this amazing documentary. It's 2 hours long. As a filmmaker, I think it could have been a little shorter, and it could have maybe built more strongly to the conclusion. But it was amazing. It was called Going Clear. It's a documentary about Scientology. Scientology has launched an expensive media attack against this documentary and everybody in it. smearing them, saying these are crazy people, they're known liars. We had to kick them out of Scientology because they were not getting Phaeton, whatever it is they're supposed to be getting over there. And I posted a link to a website called Operation Clambake. This website has been exposing Scientology since 1996. This documentary, Going Clear, is dragging it into the mainstream. As well it should. And it's going to be on again. Check your local listings. You want to make a point of seeing this. Just how much insane amounts of money they have made off of people, how many lives they've wrecked. It's arrogance. They maltreat their own staff. They're making $10 a day over there. Brought harm to children, harassed people. And I actually used to bump into these people when I worked in Hollywood many, many years ago. And one of those encounters I had with Scientology took place at pretty much the same time I got blacklisted from Hollywood over the Vince Foster murder, and in the very same building, which also housed CNN's Hollywood division. Now, the owner of this computer animation shop company that I was doing a project for at the time was deep into Scientology, and the literature was all over the office, had a whole wall-sized bookcase of the writings of L. Ron Hubbard. And as it turned out, there was another company in that building, and it was called Something Interactive. I don't remember the first name. And it billed itself as a web design firm, but it was totally staffed with uniform-wearing Scientologists, one of whom, while trying to recruit me, unsuccessfully I might add, told me that it was actually the church's cyber warfare center, engaged in sabotaging websites critical of Scientology, and if that failed, planting evidence on the websites to get them arrested. And these were the people who had actually hacked into the FBI's computers to acquire damaging information to use on anybody the Church of Scientology went after. Nice people over there. More about Scientology when we come back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking about the new HBO documentary, Going Clear, about the Church of Scientology, and I was sharing a personal anecdote. I'm not a Scientologist, but if you're in Hollywood, inevitably you run up against them. And 21 years ago, I was doing a project for an animation company whose owner was a Scientologist. They deliberately go after people in positions of power and authority in Hollywood, and Scientology's got almost as much influence over Hollywood as a certain other religion that everybody likes to talk about. And while I was there and they were trying to recruit me, I was shown this company, Something Interactive, that was actually Scientology's cyber warfare center. Everybody in there was in uniform. Looked like Air Force uniforms, but it was all Church of Scientology, this and that. And they admitted to me that they were there to attack websites critical of Scientology, and they had even hacked into the FBI's computers to obtain compromising information with which to threaten and blackmail and destroy enemies of the church. And there's an interesting postscript to that, because the FBI initially made a big stink over the fact that they'd broken in. Then they cooled down, turned around, and the end of the story is the FBI was hiring this Church of Scientology hacker group to do things for the FBI that the FBI didn't want to be connected to. So it's all tangled up here. Now, Huffington Post had an article, 16 Shocking Allegations in Scientology Documentary Going Clear. And again, being in Hollywood, most of this stuff was not a surprise to me. It was a shock to Claire. She had no idea this stuff was going on. Another article in the Washington Post even, how Scientology controls John Travolta and Tom Cruise. And yes, Scientology goes after these big name stars. They have the Hollywood Celebrity Center. They will just treat these people like royalty, help them in their careers because they've got a lot of inside influence. How do you think Battlefield Earth actually got made? And one of the interesting revelations coming out of Going Clear was how the Church of Scientology intentionally destroyed Tom Cruise's marriage to Nicole Kidman, because Nicole didn't want to join the Church of Scientology, and she was seen as luring Tom away from the embrace of the church. And they sabotaged the marriage and then tried to manufacture a two-order replacement girlfriend for Tom Cruise. All right, we're going to grab ourselves a phone call. The in Kentucky. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Thanks for taking my call. If I may, I'd like to comment on a previous caller you had. who talked about gun confiscation in the United States by U.S. military.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you remember the call. I think her name was Michelle.
Yes.
But I'm not sure. But anyway, she said she couldn't grasp U.S. military actually seizing firearms from American citizens. And you gave some good examples of European overseas examples of where they had. I was surprised you didn't mention that actually occurred here in the United States already in Louisiana during Hurricane Katrina, when the National Guard and the local police actually went around and rounded up guns. And in fact, if anyone wants to go online, you can just Google gun confiscation Hurricane Katrina. And actually, the NRA even put out a video on it, and there's a whole lot of information.
Yeah, I should have mentioned that. Right now, they're looking for any excuse to take guns away because they are absolutely terrified. They have lost the trust and faith of the American people, which means they've lost control. And that is a very dangerous circumstance to be in when you're trying to start World War III for real.
I agree. I just wanted to point out, though, that we've actually had it happen in the United States, and I don't have any doubt that under the right circumstances, they would definitely do it again.
Every dictator is always able to turn one segment of his population against the others. We're good, they're bad. We serve a higher purpose. To heck with the Second Amendment. Okay, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. Get on back to the news. I'm getting word that a very popular coding website, GitHub, is under DDoS attack. And GitHub is just a meeting place for people who like to write software. And lately it has developed a huge following of developing anti-censorship tools, ways of secure communication, sharing information with each other. And apparently it is this portion of the website that is currently under a DDoS attack. And we've certainly had enough of them here as well, because one thing about the government, they love to play dirty. They think it's their divine right. We don't have to play by the rules. We're the government. The rules are for ordinary people to do there. Speaking of the rules, there's a bit of a scandal coming up. It was reported in the Boston Globe. Down in Nashville, Tennessee, over the last couple of years, apparently Nashville prosecutors have made a condition with any plea deal with female defendants that they accept surgical sterilization. We don't want your kind reproducing. And apparently it's caused enough of a problem where the district attorney has stepped in and said, no, you cannot do this anymore. It's a problem with people in government. They start looking at you like your property. We can manage you. We can decide for you if you will reproduce. Have way too many people with way too much money and power out there saying, yes, I have a right to say you cannot have children anymore. It's bad for planet Earth. There's too many of you. We want more room, more golf courses. Now, back during the first Gulf War, the one that they started with that lie about stolen baby incubators, you remember that one. A lot of our veterans came home suffering strange maladies, which collectively came to be known as Gulf War Syndrome. And the response of the Pentagon was, they're just making it up. They're just trying to soak the VA for benefits. They're not really saying, just get on out of here. Well, it turns out, here we are, a quarter of a century later, and these soldiers are dying of serious illnesses, brain cancer, 2 to 3 times the rate of those elsewhere. And what has finally been acknowledged is that our troops in Iraq were exposed to nerve gas. More than 200,000 of the 700,000 U.S. troops sent to Iraq and Kuwait were exposed to nerve gas and chemical agents, not from Saddam Hussein, from our own U.S. forces. That's disgusting. Alrighty, coming up here on the top of the hour, we got a few things to talk about here. If you're in southern Michigan tonight, better get the warm clothes back out. It's going to be snowing. Snowing tonight, going into early tomorrow morning. Over the weekend, it was snowing in northern Mississippi. Temperatures dropped to record levels in Danville and Lynchburg. up in the New England area, this is supposed to be the start of the charter fishing season. And the charters are in serious trouble because the harbors are still ice blocked. They can't take fishing charters out. There's no way out of it. They're just stuck. They have to wait for the ice to go away. And, of course, this affects their bottom line. And most of them are just barely making ends meet as it is. Another story coming out of Shepherdstown Chronicle. Unseasonable cold sets records in 4 West Virginia cities. Another story out of Ohio.com. Record cold set Saturday, snow and sleet on the way. Now, if I recall correctly, April's just a couple of days away here. Record cold reported at Greenville-Spartanburg Airport. It's still out there. It's a cold spring. And yes, the snow and ice is finally starting to melt, but it's still far cooler than average. And the carbonazis are still out there trying to find some way they can make you think that human-caused global warming is real. It's why we're getting the cold weather. It's all your fault, and you will atone by buying carbon credits and paying carbon taxes. And I don't know if they seriously think they're still going to convince anybody at this late date, or all the people who are involved in this hoax are forced to go on lying, because at this point, with the government and corporate media credibility hanging by a thread, they don't dare admit even once that they were wrong or in error or fraudulent, or the whole house of cards starts coming apart. Now, as it turns out, this cherished theory that human-caused global warming causes colder weather has been put to the scientific test and found wanting. More about this when we come back from the news break. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. Tom is still in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, and ready to answer the phone when you call on in. We're talking about human-caused global warming. We've had an absolutely brutal winter. It is delaying long into the spring. We're seeing record cold all across the northern hemisphere right now. And the carbonazis are trying to counter it by saying, oh, well, the Arctic ice is at an all-time record low. Or we had a record high temperature in Antarctica. And see, the gag there is they know that you don't have the resources to go out and double-check them when they make these statements. Although satellite data records have already discredited the claim that the Arctic is at an all-time low. And we have one thermometer from Antarctica that's saying, oh, it's 60 degrees. And it, too, could be sitting in next to some source of heat, which we have documented numerous times. The official NOAA temperature measuring stations on which these claims of a warming planet are based are habitually located in areas with a lot of heat to them. All the rural stations in the cooler parts of the landscape were shut down for budgetary reasons. And we have photos of these NOAA stations in the air conditioning outflow of buildings. I've got a picture of one of them right next to a trash incinerator. Gee, I wonder if they're recording hot temperatures there. And remember, they're always relying on these weather stations at the airport. It's a record 86 degrees at the airport. Well, take a look at where that temperature sensor is. It's right in the middle of the airport, surrounded by aircraft belching out, burning kerosene. And it makes sense to have a weather station there, because regardless of the reason, you've got to have the exact temperature and pressure to calculate your stall speeds for takeoff and landing. But it doesn't mean the world outside the airport is that hot, but they try and sell that. Now, one of the stories that the carbonazis have been coming up with every year that there's another harsh winter, they keep saying, well, you know, human-caused global warming causes snow and ice. Really, it does. And, of course, back in 2000, they were saying because of human-caused global warming, there wasn't going to be any more snow and ice. And they're hoping you won't remember that. But you will, because I'm going to keep rubbing their noses in it. And my response to that is, okay, take a pan of water, put it on the stove on low heat. When it freezes over, get back to me. And they tried to come up with this whole idea about how this temperature imbalance between the equator and the poles was why heating was driving the cooling, and you need to understand how it works. Well, apparently, according to a story over at Penny for Your Thought blogspot, somebody actually modeled this theory that had been put out and found out it flat out does not work. Warming does not lead to cooling. It leads to warming. Global warming does not cause extreme winter weather. And they're going to go on lying about it because at this point they can't admit they were bamboozling you all this time. Trust in government and media is already at rock bottom, record lows. So they're going to keep on raising on this busted flush as hard as they can because the media wants to save its credibility. All these agencies, NASA, NOAA, IPCC, they're trying to salvage their credibility. And, of course, the federal government wants a carbon tax because they've run out of money. They didn't make the fortune they thought they were going to make off of Obamacare. Now, stepping back to this Going Clear documentary, one of the things that's really interesting about it is that the people interviewed in the documentary about what was going on inside Scientology are former members of the church. Some of them were official Church of Scientology spokespeople. And this documentary intercut what they're saying today with what they were saying for the media cameras back then. They were very convincing about, oh, no, this is all good and this is helping. And because that's what spokespeople do. They're paid to lie to the media cameras. And you need to remember that is hardly unique to the Church of Scientology. It's certainly stock and trade for the U.S. Department of State, the White House, the Congress, genetic engineering companies, corporations in general. That's what they hire these well-paid spokespeople to do, get out and be convincing liars. Jan Psaki would be a good example. Now then, let's talk about Fukushima because the news there is not good. And we have been following this disaster ever since it happened and looking at everything they say they're going to do, and it never works out. The water treatment plant didn't work. They're having to build tanks and store this highly radioactive water on the site. And if you look at the site today through Google Earth, you'll see how many of those tanks they now have. They were talking about an ice wall. They've suggested that twice. They've now dismissed that twice. And at this point, all these years afterwards, they're finally coming out to say what we've known since the beginning. This cannot be stopped. The remains of the reactors are down in the ground. They're spontaneously fissioning. And there's nothing they can do about it. They don't have the technology. They're basically now saying, yeah, we're stuck with it. That part of Japan is going to be devoid of human life for at least 200 years. And apparently, the dam they built around Fukushima Unit 3 fuel pool was knocked askew by falling debris. TEPCO is insisting, well, we don't think it's leaking. Now, the problem with those fuel rod pools, even a used fuel rod continues to generate heat from decay processes inside. That's why they have to be kept cooled in tanks of water with boron added to it. If those tanks do leak, if they lose the coolant, those rods can spontaneously combust, and you're going to have highly radioactive plutonium oxide wafting downwind. Now, here in Hawaii, down on the island of Maui, and I haven't been down here to check our local Oahu beaches yet, but there's a beach called Baldwin Beach. It's on Maui. It is very scenic, very pristine. It's used a lot for travel brochures and TVs and movies. It's your typical Hawaii beach. But apparently, not too long ago, people showed up at the beach one morning and found it covered with Japanese tsunami garbage. There was a shopping basket from a Japanese market, a complete plastic car bumper, all kinds of stuff. And there was a local community volunteer group came down to pick it all up and haul it away to restore the beach. I hope somebody had a radiation meter. Because if you're cleaning up that debris and it's from Fukushima itself, it could be a source of contamination, and you need to be very, very careful about that. Now, I've started rerunning radiation samples here on Oahu, and there has been a slight uptick over the normal pre-Fukushima base level radiation. I mean, we're all sitting on hardened volcanic basalt, which is slightly radioactive to begin with. And right after Fukushima, there were noticeable spikes in airborne radiation, and after that toned off, I quit taking daily readings. I started last week, and yeah, we're definitely seeing slightly higher than used to be the case. So at some point, I'm going to get on down here to the shoreline and see if there's any identifiable Japanese debris to add to the world-famous WhatReallyHappened.com debris collection. I really should take pictures of that and put it up online. It started as a joke, but it's actually grown into something that people find very interesting when they come on over. I've got a piece of trinitite from the world's first atomic bomb, coal from the Titanic, tiny little piece of the Hindenburg, all kinds of really weird stuff like this. And it's junk. It's what it says, it's debris. Dust from the World Trade Towers, volcanic glass from Mount St. Helens, but all together in one place. People find it fascinating. They pick it up and they fondle it. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back.
In an unpredictable world, it's good to know you are in control of food, your greatest dependency. Go Foods are storable for 25 years, quick fix, non-GMO, kosher, health store quality food at discount store prices delivered to your door. Go Foods is there when you need it most. Feed Your Frida package is available with up to 3 months of food for free. Call Go Foods at 1-800-648-9753 or on the web at www.storefoodnow.com.
Hi, this is Ted Anderson. Have you ever wondered why banks, stockbrokers, investment advisors won't talk about gold IRAs? They've been available since 1986, yet the financial industry won't recognize the value of gold for your retirement. Gold has outperformed paper investments, yet no word about IRAs. If you would like to have gold for your retirement, call 800-686-2237. Don't get left behind by rising inflation and low returns. Call 800-686-2237. Secure your future and call 1-800-686-2237. On the average, Americans work between 45 to 50 years, hoping to build up enough wealth to retire and live out their golden years. Unfortunately, with taxation, the rising cost of food, energy, housing, and medical, many retirees are forced to live below the poverty line. Is this a flaw free enterprise, or is our monetary unit we call the Federal Reserve Note forcing us into perpetual debt, ensuring inflation and higher taxes? These questions and more can be answered by reading G. Edward Griffin's book, The Creature from Jekyll Island. Congressman Ron Paul states it's what every American needs to know about central bank power. A gripping adventure into the secret world of international banking cartel. Hi, this is Ted Anderson. I will give a silver dollar from the early 1900s to anyone who purchases this book. Call 1-800-686-2237 and order a copy today. It's critical that the public be made aware of the system. Call and order your copy today at 1-800-686-2237. That's 1-800-686-2237.
Hi, my name is Scott Fuchs, teacher and rowing coach for over 14 years. I was sluggish, overweight, on prescription drugs, and only 30-something. Fortunately, I was referred to Dr. Z, and happy to say Dr. Z's all-natural protocols over a consistent course resolved my health issues. I'm in the best shape of my life, and most importantly, on 0 medications.
I'm Dr. Stanowski, author of Evology, trained as a primary care physician, surgical manipulation under anesthesia, expert in nutrition, diet, weight loss, immune system, and I specialize in chiropractic. My 15 years of professional experience has taught me the 4 keys to vibrant health: a balanced musculoskeletal system, an integrated nervous system, a flowing lymphatic system, and a body filled with over 90 essential nutrients. This has been a secret too long. Actualize your potential, reverse disease. Call me, Dr. Z. 201-945-1177, 201-945-1177, evolyourself.com.
Don't truth, don't tell me lies. Give me truth or say goodbye. We need the truth so we can heal. So give me something real.
Like the Matrix, I knew something was wrong. It helps me to think, so I wrote this song. Without real facts, you won't know what's the matter. The dollar crash, the upcoming disaster. MSM is part of the problem. Keeping people distracted keeps them from solving.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, there's an old Chinese proverb that one should never ask a question to which one does not really want the answer. This was demonstrated last week when Fox News went up to Harvard University to ask them, you know, who was the greatest threat to the world right now, ISIS or the United States, and those kids at Harvard came back and said, well, it's the United States, obviously. And Fox News proceeded to try and make fun of these students at Harvard. Oh, a bunch of college idiots. Well, Reuters, apparently not knowing about the embarrassment over at Fox, ran a new poll, a Reuters Ipsos poll, asking who was more of a threat, Obama or Putin. And were surprised when most people came back and said, it's Obama in the United States. And more people around the world. Apparently, the survey that was outside the country, 1/4 of respondents from 65 countries named the United States as the greatest threat to world peace. Yeah, who's doing all the attacking? Who's doing all the bombing? Who's lying to start wars? Who's using torture? Anyway. Story out of The Guardian pointing out the rather odd change that we've seen from the FBI, which not too long ago was encouraging the use of encryption by ordinary law-abiding citizens to secure your communications from cyber criminals. Now, today, they want to ban it completely. FBI Director Jim Comey was back before Congress saying we can't allow people to have encryption. And it's not just a flip-flop, because back when the FBI was recommending the use of encryption, that was the day when the government was saying there are official systems of encryption you should use, which we now know were all backdoored to allow the government to spy on you while you believed your communications were private and secure. Well, now we know that anything that is blessed by the government as a secure form of communication is wide open to the government, and by extension, wide open to the hackers, the cyber criminals, some of whom may be NSA, and all of whom sooner or later will find those back doors that are in the encryption systems, in the routers, in the BIOS. Far from making our country safe and secure for us to do business in, the policies of the United States government have left us wide open to cyber attacks. I mean, going on back to that story with Sidney Blumenthal and Hillary Clinton, hackers even got into her server, got Sidney's emails about what was going on in Libya, back-channel intelligence that should not have been made public, and was. So they got to make up their mind. I'm a strong believer in the use of strong encryption. That's why I did the NSA challenges, and I'm working on a public key version of the 10,000 Monkeys Code, which I will give away for free, so I'm not in violation of any export laws. Because unless and until the government has evidence you are engaged in a crime, they are not allowed to peek into your personal communication. That's what the Fourth Amendment is all about. And if the government will not take responsibility for compliance with the Fourth Amendment, we must do it ourselves. And I'm going to get all kinds of emails from people saying, well, you're supporting terrorism by supporting encryption. Do you really think real criminals and real terrorists are using all these systems knowing they're already wide open to the NSA? It's a complete waste of money. This is why the NSA is unable to say we actually caught a real terrorist. They're trying to take credit for arrests that were stings, setups, entrapment by the FBI or ordinary police work. But anybody who's really engaged in an act of terror or a major crime are using offline communications technology. They're not going to use the iPhone, the iPad, the tablet, the Android. They're not going to use PGP or any of that stuff because they know it's been compromised. Alrighty, let's see. We're going to take a phone call here. Richard in Canada. Aloha, Richard. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi. You were talking about Scientology earlier.
Yes.
And in 1989, I experienced them too. I went to Hollywood, California.
Yes. And
I walked right on the sidewalk there, and they had a free IQ test there right in the front. There's a lady there. Yeah, she was standing in the front. It looked like she was brainwashed. But you know, I bumped them also where I live in Ottawa, and I kind of made a big research about it.
Yes.
About the Scientology, and it came to a man-made religion. But you know, also, I don't know if you're aware, last year there's this gentleman from Texas there. His name is John Hagee. He went to Israel. Hello?
Yes, I'm listening.
And he went to Israel, and he was waiting for Netanyahu. He got big influence with Netanyahu, and he gives him millions of dollars from his donations. And Netanyahu came in late, and he says, "There's the Messiah." See, it's amazing how man can decide that, they don't realize that every man's equal, then pointing out that, that this guy is a Messiah, and people literally believe that. That's why you wonder how come those wars, going on around the world. It's all influenced by, they make religion to make war, It's sad, because people don't make research that, I studied a lot of, and I made a lot of research,
Well, at the very end of the documentary, Going Clear, there was a very telling observation, and it echoes something I've been saying on this show for a lot of years, is that all of this is supported by belief, because belief frees you from the work of having to actually think. And I view all belief systems as inherently tools of enslavement. And yes, there's a lot of religions that do good work out there. There's a lot of religions that do bad work. I mean, the Catholic Church was very rude to my ancestors back in the 1490s. Witch trials, Inquisition, torture, Holy Crusades, and so forth and so on. It's not like they're all good or all bad. But the problem with belief is, beliefs are the chains that hold free minds slaves. No chain of iron or steel ever bound a human being tighter than the chains of beliefs that we're indoctrinated with when we're young. And it takes...
I know. Yeah, I know. I realize that. I know. And when I made the research is, people don't even realize that Scripture is based on faith, not on religion. And if people practice love, they would love each other. Nobody would hurt each other.
Well, there's a lot of that comes out of religion, but then you get some opportunist who says, they're infidels, they refuse to believe as we do, and therefore we have a right to invade their country. We've got to free the Holy Land from those gosh darn Arabs, forgetting, of course, that Christianity began as an Arab religion.
Yeah, Mike, did you know that the first religion, one of the first religion in Babylonian is they made the priests so they can confess to man, so they had the power of their secret of people. That's how they started with religion. But literally, the religion is in the Scripture. It's love, and if you live by faith, that's not religion. Like I believe my mother created me, but I didn't see her do it. So that's faith, and that's why the people believe in faith instead of hate and following practices that they're not supposed to. They realize that, did you know that even historically Jesus, they tried to kill him many times, because he didn't believe in religion. He believed in faith.
I think there's an issue there for debate. Unfortunately, we're almost to the commercial break here. Okay. But I think distilling it all down, whether you're talking about Scientology or you're talking about Christianity or Judaism or Islam, it comes down to the simple fact that good people will do good things, bad people will do bad things, and both will often use religion as their excuse.
Yeah, exactly. I agree 100%.
Okay?
Thank you, Mike.
All right, we're going to let you go there. And anyway, but I think the world would be much better off if humans lost their ability to simply believe something without knowing it to be true. We'll be right back.
The Genesis Communications Network is one of America's premier broadcasters of captivating talk radio. We thank you for listening. Now, just imagine, there are thousands of people who are just as passionate about radio as you are. But what you may not realize is how easy and affordable it is to advertise with us. Radio commercials for your business could be heard on hundreds of radio stations across the U.S. every day. We can help you by creating an effective radio advertising campaign for your company. From script writing to producing your commercial, just like the one you're listening to right now. No other network provides the level of customer service we do. When it comes to radio advertising, we are your one-stop shop. And no matter how big or small your business is, we can help. Email us at advertise@gcnlive.com, and an experienced advertising executive will help you take the first step towards driving more customers to your business or website. Advertise@gcnlive.com. Easy, affordable, effective.
This alert just came in. This special announcement is for business owners and leaders of organizations who've been waiting for the right time to build. General Steel has made it impossible to wait any longer with rock-bottom prices that could save you thousands. That's right, General Steel, America's leader in pre-engineered structures, is offering buildings at prices you will never see again. Don't miss these prices. A 50 by 100 for $35,000. You heard right. That's 5,000 square feet for $35,000. Manufacturers, if you need a larger building, try a 100 by 100 commercial building for $129,000. You can't afford to rent with these prices. Imagine a 70 by 100-foot church building for under $69,000. With the economy improving and interest rates still at historic lows, you can't afford to wait. So call 866-91-STEEL. Lock in your price now. Call 866-91-STEEL. That's 866-917-8335.
We live in a complicated society. Stressful issues are always popping up. Have you ever been treated unfairly by someone? Have you ever been overcharged for a repair? Have you ever signed a contract or a document worried about identity theft? How many times have you been in those unique situations where you just wanted to call an attorney to find out if you're right or wrong, or what your legal rights are? But every time you think about calling an attorney, what do you think about first? That's right. Who do you call, and how much will it cost? Our friends at Legal Shield have found a solution. With a nationwide network of 6,900 attorneys who average 19 years of experience, Legal Shield's law firms take over 40,000 calls per week helping their members. For less than $20 per month, you can have access to Legal Shield on everything from the trivial to the traumatic. Let Legal Shield stand up for your rights at lsprotection.com. That's lsprotection.com. Or call 855-340-SAVE, 855-340-7283.
Results will vary from case to case.
The freeze-dry guy, a leader in the preparedness industry for 44 years, is closing his California warehouse. Don't miss out on this huge warehouse sale and receive discounts from 30 to 40% off on the finest Mountain House and Packaway brand freeze-dried and dehydrated foods for long-term food storage or even everyday use. Plus deep discounts on all in-stock survival gear. The Freeze-Dry Guy is offering a wide selection of freeze-dried foods in number 10 cans and even individually packaged entrees. Remember, meats, vegetables, fruits, and long-range patrol rations are the main components for any long-term food storage. This is limited to stock on hand, so hurry and call 866-404-3663 or 530-798-4414. Remember, as always, free shipping to the lower 48 states. So hurry up and call 866-404-3663 or 530-798-4414. Remember, this is limited to stock on hand. The Freeze-Dry Guy is your choice for survival food in an uncertain world.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And over the commercial break, I was watching on Fox News, and they're covering the story of this lady named Kimberly Kitchen. And this story is out of Pittsburgh. This lady has been working as an estate lawyer for a decade and apparently never went to law school, forged the document saying that she'd gone to law school, passed the bar, had a law license. Apparently, she was so good at what she was doing, she made partner at her firm and even served as president of the County Bar Association. Her co-workers at the firm are saying she's incredibly competent, worked very diligently, was devoted to the people that she served. And she was a complete fraud. Now, obviously, this woman has done something wrong. She's looking at felony charges. But the first thing that I thought was, all these other lawyers around in her firm, all these other lawyers at the county bar, and they didn't pick up on the fact that she had not been trained? I think that says something very alarming about the state of lawyers in general. Do they really know what they're doing, or is it all just back-channel deal-making? It's kind of a funny story when you think about it, but, we all have this, well, I'm not going to say it's a love-hate relationship with lawyers. It's pretty much hate-hate. And It's another one of these priesthoods. We're supposed to believe these are good people. And then we find out there was this 10-year phony who was not picked up on by the supposedly trained and accredited lawyers around her. There's something wrong with the state of legal education in this country. Alrighty. I remember many, many years ago when my mother was trying to get me to be a lawyer, and my dad wanted me to be an engineer, and I fooled them all, and I went off and became an astronomer. Very interesting story in the Los Angeles Times commenting on the fact that because of these contracts that exist with these private prison corporations that are running these corporations as factories and slave labor operations, just like the Nazi camps were. They were slave labor factories providing material for the government. And apparently contractual obligations mean that the U.S. government, by hook or by crook, has to provide 34,000 new inmates to private prisons every day across the country. That to me sounds like human trafficking or slavery. And of course they cover it up by saying, well, you're in violation of our do not pick the daisies law. You must go to prison there. And you're an accountant. They need an accountant over at the prison factory. So we're going to gin up some. You've got tinted windows. Oh, well, you've got a license for tinted windows. All right. You got a bad headlight. Off to the prison factory you go. We're a nation that's feeding on itself. So let's talk about GMO and Monsanto for a little tiny bit. As you remember, there was this landmark study conducted by French scientists that raised laboratory rats for their entire lifetime, and there was a control group that ate all natural corn. There was a second group that was fed natural corn with glyphosate pesticide on it, Roundup. A third group that was being given GMO corn, but no pesticide, and a fourth group that got both, double whammy. Now, Monsanto's own test for the safety of GMO stopped at the third month, and what this French study showed is starting in month number 4, just after Monsanto's cutoff, the rats started developing serious medical problems, massive tumors, infertility issues, shortened lifespans. Monsanto excoriated the report. The media denounced it. And oddly enough, the journal that had published this study, the Journal of Food and Chemical Toxicology, hired Richard Goodman, a former Monsanto employee, to be on the editorial board, from which he ordered the Journal of Food and Chemical Toxicology to retract the article and say, we're sorry, we did not mean to offend. Now, the article was retracted. It was never refuted, and that's an important distinction to make. Well, apparently over at the Journal of Food and Chemical Toxicology, they've decided they've had enough of sucking on Monsanto's genitalia because they have now fired Richard Goodman. He's been removed from the editorial board. And the former editor-in-chief, A. Wallace Hayes, is going to be replaced as well. And it looks like this journal was looking at the declining readership numbers and saying, well, we've got to get our integrity back somehow. And you could certainly do that by republishing that study. Now, there's another little interesting article over here. It's called News versus Sub-News, How the Game Works. It was over in John Rappaport's website, where he's talking about this admission by an editor of the New England Journal of Medicine, Marcia Engel. And she basically wrote a book in 2009, and in it, and was quoted by the New York Review of Books saying, it is simply no longer possible to believe much of the clinical research that is published or to rely on the judgment of trusted physicians or authoritative medical guidelines. I take no pleasure in this conclusion, which I reached slowly and reluctantly over my 2 decades as an editor of the New England Journal of Medicine. Now, for any up-and-coming reporter, this would be a hot story. Oh, my goodness, we can't trust those published medical studies that say GMO is good for you and global warming. But, of course, in the United States of America, that story just sort of faded away into the ether. By the way, Bill Nye has now hopped onto the GMOs are safe and good for you bandwagon. And that's not to be much of a surprise because he also supports the theory of human-caused global warming. Bill Nye understands the golden rule of science. Whoever's got the gold makes the science. Oh, yes, if you're paying me to prove epicycles, I'll prove epicycles. You're paying me to hunt witches, I will find witches. You're paying me to prove the polar bears are going extinct, I'll go out and extinct them myself if I have to. Science really is being used as the new religion. Now, conventional, traditional religion has lost control of the public a long time ago between the age of reason, the age of science, the child molestation scandals, and the rest of it. You can't have a government comes up and said, we must invade this country because the priests say the gods demand it. They're going to get laughed off the podium. These days, they use white laboratory coats instead of priests' robes to convince you that something is beyond questioning. Get a guy, white laboratory coat, glasses, little pocket protector, pens, and a clipboard and say, oh yes, this is the real world. And we know that science makes major goofs. I mean, up until the 1950s, doctors said smoking was good for you. The beauty of science is supposed to be that it acknowledges individual scientists will make mistakes. That's what scientific method is supposed to do. Double-blind studies. Take the human factor out. Last decade, we've seen the human factor crammed back in, where scientists are willing to sell their honor and ethics and reputation for enough funding to prove that a can of soda is good nutrition, a candy bar is good nutrition, it's good for you, you should. Just endless amounts of nonsense. All righty. When we come back from this next commercial break, more about Monsanto here in Hawaii, some of the other things they're getting ready to do. So we're going to take a break for some commercials, and we'll be right back.
As if chlorine in our water weren't bad enough, now they're adding ammonia?
It's true. Some municipalities are now adding ammonia plus chlorine to your water supply. It's a disinfectant called chloramine. But with a trusted Big Berkey water filter, you can keep chloramine out of your water. New NSF EPA certified lab tests show EPA Berkey water filters remove chloramines, pharmaceuticals, BPA, pesticides, bacteria and viruses, all forms of fluoride, and much more. Big Berkey water filters are the original and most trusted on the market. The gold standard in water purification. And our filters last for years at less than 2 cents per gallon. Big Berkey, the one that's powerful enough to purify stagnant pond water. Get your Big Berkey today. Call 1-877-99-BERKEY or click BigBerkeyWaterFilters.com. That's 1-877-99-BERKEY. Big Berkey Water Filters, for the love of clean water.
Don't complain about your cable bill going up and up and up. Do something about it. Grab a pencil and jot down this special number, 1-855-905-MY-TV. The more cable TV rates go up, the better digital satellite TV looks. Say goodbye to the cable guy and get more of your favorite channels in 100% digital quality for less money. Call 1-855-905-MY-TV. Sign up for packages starting as low as $19.99, and there's no equipment to buy. You get free HD TV upgrade, a free DVR upgrade, and free professional installation. You control what you watch when you watch it. Record your favorite shows. Pause and rewind live TV. Even skip the commercials. Watch local channels too. At just $19.99, what are you waiting for? Pull out your major credit or debit card. Call 1-855-905-MY-TV. 1-855-905-MY-TV. Say goodbye to the cable guy. Cut costs and get more. 1-855-905-MY-TV. 1-855-905-MY-TV.
We live in a complicated society. Stressful issues are always popping up. Have you ever been treated unfairly by someone? Have you ever been overcharged for a repair? Have you ever signed a contract or a document? Worried about identity theft? How many times have you been in those unique situations where you just wanted to call an attorney to find out if you're right or wrong, or what your legal rights are? But every time you think about calling an attorney, what do you think about first? That's right. Who do you call, and how much will it cost? Our friends at Legal Shield have found a solution. With a nationwide network of 6,900 attorneys who average over 19 years of experience, Legal Shield's law firms take over 40,000 calls per week helping their members. For less than $20 per month, you can have access to Legal Shield on everything from the trivial to the traumatic. Let Legal Shield stand up for your rights at lsprotection.com. That's lsprotection.com. Or call 855-340-SAVE, 855-340-7283.
Results will vary from case to case.
This alert just came in. This special announcement is for business owners and leaders of organizations who've been waiting for the right time to build. General Steel has made it impossible to wait any longer with rock-bottom prices that could save you thousands. That's right, General Steel, America's leader in pre-engineered structures, is offering buildings at prices you will never see again. Don't miss these prices. A 50 by 100 for $35,000. You heard right. That's 5,000 square feet for $35,000. Manufacturers, if you need a larger building, try a 100 by 100 commercial building for $129,000. You can't afford to rent with these prices. Imagine a 70 by 100-foot church building for under $69,000. With the economy improving and interest rates still at historic lows, you can't afford to wait. So call 866-91-STEEL. Lock in your price now. Call 866-91-STEEL. That's 866-917-8335.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we're talking about Monsanto. We're talking about GMOs. We're talking about Hawaii. As you know, there's a big fight going on down on the island of Maui, where last election, the Maui residents passed a referendum banning any more experimental test plots of non-approved GMO crops on their island. And these corporations love to test these unapproved crops here in Hawaii because if they make a mistake, they think it's going to be contained here in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And they can just write off Hawaii if there's a really bad mistake, like the corn marches out of the cornfield and starts molesting the tourists. So there was this referendum. It won overwhelmingly. Monsanto immediately went to court and got a sympathetic judge to file an injunction banning enforcement of this bill. And then ever since then, it's been delayed. There's been a change of judge. The new judge is saying no ruling because there are two state bills under consideration in Honolulu, which will set the standard for GMO testing in Hawaii. But those two bills have missed a technical deadline and will not be read till next session, another year. And meanwhile, of course, these companies are going on testing out these unapproved experimental crops in the soil of Maui, also up here in Oahu. Now, a gentleman by the name of Dustin Barca, he's a pro MMA fighter, former pro surfer, and he is basically lending his financial and popular strength into the fight. He's drawing some media attention to this, and he's starting to get some interviews, at least in the local media, about what's going on down on Maui. And it's important to remember what we're talking about here. We're not talking about something that the USDA and FDA assure us is safe, which doesn't mean that it is. We're talking about non-approved experimental crops. And they're using our state as an experimental garden. And probably the reason they're pushing so hard on Maui is because of that huge lawsuit they got hit with from the wheat producers in the Northwest. I think 7 states are involved in the class action lawsuit they just settled, where their fields were contaminated with an unapproved GMO wheat from several states away. And by the way, being out here in Hawaii does not mean that pollen cannot get back to the mainland, or for that matter, reach Asia. Now, there's another story coming out of Tibil.com, where Monsanto, not happy with food crops, is now looking at ornamental plants for GMO. They're starting to engineer and try and sell and get approved GM trees and grasses. And they're trying to get approval for it. I mean, they've had problems with the GM papaya, which is a genetically engineered tree. There's already been a contamination issue. That's one of the reasons people on Maui are up in arms. They wanted natural papaya on their grounds. Now all of a sudden they got GM papaya. They had nothing to say about that. Now, GM Arborgen, which is Monsanto's spinoff, has developed a GM eucalyptus tree. And there's concern there because this tree hosts known pathogens harmful to human life that do not survive on the natural eucalyptus. And they're still out there pushing this thing. And what we already know from Roundup Ready corn, Roundup Ready soy, Roundup Ready wheat, the ability to control pests with Roundup is time limited. Eventually those pests evolve to be tolerant of the glyphosate, and you will have to go back to using the other pesticides. Now, down in Sierra Leone, they're trying to end the Ebola outbreak there with a government-mandated lockdown, and it's caused all kinds of upset because people are being told to stay in their homes for 3 days straight. It's a 3-day national lockdown to try and get this Ebola done. I guess they're operating on the theory that the Ebola virus, after 3 days, will be dead on the surface. That's not actually necessarily true. Ebola can survive in dried secretions for longer than that, but that's 3 days is what they're doing. And apparently there have been riots and crowds. The police are using tear gas on people to get them back into their homes. And here is where the story gets really scary, because they're getting people in their homes and they're doing checks on them, and they're discovering hundreds of new suspected cases of Ebola. Because all of these official numbers that we're getting about how Ebola is under control in all of these African nations are based on people who voluntarily come into the clinics and say, I'm sick, check me out. But there has been a huge problem with people not wanting to go to the clinic because of suspicions that this Ebola outbreak was started in a medical facility at Kenema during tests of an Ebola vaccine. And word of mouth spread all over, and they said the Ebola is coming from these clinics and hospitals. And apparently, since they started these 3-day lockdown and checking people, reports of new sick people increased by 191%. A lot of people who may be suffering from Ebola are just staying at home, and that's probably not confined to just Sierra Leone. Now then, here's an interesting story. This is out of Health Impact News. Apparently up in Canada, scientists are being censored from addressing the dangers of aluminum added to vaccines. Got mercury in there, now we're going to pump you full of aluminum. And there is some evidence to indicate that aluminum contamination in your body is a cause of Alzheimer's. And what's really interesting is the U.S. government is putting pressure on the media to not report stories of adverse reactions to vaccines. And they're out there trying to demonize the anti-vaxxers. How could you even doubt that we would sell you an unsafe product? Well, my answer to that is 1976 swine flu vaccine. The vaccine killed 50 times more people than the flu itself did and had to be called off. We have the same thing going on now with the measles vaccine. In the last 10 years, no American has died from measles, but the vaccine court has acknowledged 100 deaths from the measles vaccine. But it's all about money and adding fuel to that particular fire here. Over at Global Research in Canada, lawmakers led by Representative Adam Schiff, Democrat of California, Charlie Dent, Republican of Pennsylvania, Thomas Marino, Republican Pennsylvania, and Peter Welch, Democrat Vermont, want to pass a bill declaring that vaccines are essential to national security. They must be mandated. They must be immune from civil litigation. And, of course, all four of these guys are getting huge campaign donations from big pharmaceuticals. And according to The Hill, more than 90 members of Congress have signed on to this resolution. If you want to know if we're living in a dictatorship, yeah, we are. Where you are being ordered to buy and use a medication, even though you are perfectly healthy at the moment. We don't know if it's going to work. A lot of the recent vaccines haven't worked. In fact, a lot of the recent vaccines we know make people sick. Johns Hopkins has a warning. Immunocompromised patients may not be visited by anybody who's recently been vaccinated. Because if you've been vaccinated, you are shedding live virus. And you can infect people around you. But it's those people who refuse vaccines that are responsible for these epidemics. They're bad. We're good. Now, a little note for those of you who were fans of the TV series Whaling Wars. For the first time in 30 years, Japanese whaling ships have returned from the Antarctic trip empty. Now, it's not because of the Whale Wars people, although I'm sure they were down there harassing, but the United Nations issued an order saying that Japan can no longer engage in a scientific whale hunt because it's very obvious they weren't serving any scientific purposes. They were just using that as an excuse to harvest and sell whale meat, which is very, very popular in Japan. And the UN finally put its foot down. And so the Nishin Maru sailed back into Japan with an empty hull. There's the music. Time for me to get out of here and work on upgrading my website's code. We will be back tomorrow here on the Genesis Communication Network. Until then, please make a point of telling everybody you know about Genesis, about whatreallyhappened.com. Have the courage to stand up and proclaim to the world this government has gone off the rails. It doesn't serve the people anymore. It serves the money junkies and the war machine. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.
By now, you heard about Bitcoins, but did you know that over 65,000 businesses accept Bitcoins? Listen, if you're already earning Bitcoins or trying to make money in the Bitcoin market, you've got to know bidbit.co, because at bidbit.co, you can receive Bitcoin by selling your personal items or business products. You heard right. Whether personal or business, you can now buy, sell, and auction your products quickly, easily, and securely at bidbit.co. That's bidbit.co. bidbit.co.
This is the Genesis Communications Network, GCN.